Upon the occasion of his latest indictment, Trump took to social media, as is his wont, responding thusly yesterday evening.
And they go after him on a boxes hoax, just like the Russia hoax and all of the others. It's just been going on for 7 years. They can't stop because it's election interference at the highest level. There's never been anything like what's happened. I'm an innocent man. I'm an innocent person. They had the Mueller hoax, the Mueller report, and that came out. No collusion after 2.5 years. That was set up by Hillary Clinton and Democrats. But this is what they do. This is what they do so well. If they figure the way they're going to stop us is by using what's called warfare. And that's what it is. This is warfare for the law. And we can't let it happen. We can't let it happen. Our country is going to hell. And they come after Donald Trump, weaponizing the Justice Department, weaponizing the FBI. We can't let this continue to go on because it's ripping our country to shreds.
For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Andy McCarthy, former Chief Assistant U.S. Attorney, Southern District of New York, which would be Manhattan, contributing editor to National Review, author of the bestseller Ball of Collusion, The Plot to Rig an Election and Destroy a Presidency. Andy, thanks as always for being with us. Appreciate it.
Dan, Amy, how are you?
You have a new chapter in your book.
Our new book entirely.
Our new book,
yeah. The Trump indictments. That's worthy of a book. I
don't know if I don't know if it sounds like it'd be War and Peace at this point.
Yeah, right, exactly. So is Trump right that this indictment is another illustration of lawfare by the left?
Yeah, I think if you took it in the abstract and asked, like, did he do it? Like, did these crimes happen? As if like that was the only thing that mattered, and he was the only thing that mattered. That would be one thing, but what the administration of the law is supposed to be even-handed across the board. So the question always is, is everybody getting equal justice under the law? And it's not, to the extent that that's his position or his argument, he's completely right about that. There's, I think Hillary Clinton's offense was far more egregious than what Trump did here because, and I don't approve of what Trump did here, but Hillary Clinton set up a communication system that was non-secure, knowing that she had a position where national security and foreign relations information, which are classified, was going to make up about 80% of her work. So she set up this system knowing that it necessarily meant classified information was going to be transmitted and stored on that system. And she conducted government business over it for years, including communicating with the President of the United States from Russia, under circumstances where it was easy, and the FBI ultimately found it would have been easy for foreign intelligence services to penetrate her communications while she was actively making American policy. And then under a congressional subpoena, she destroyed tens of thousands of government files. And because of the way it was pitched to the public, especially by Obama and Comey, we got into this morass of arguing whether she was grossly negligent or not, when, as I argued at the time and continue to believe, gross negligence had nothing to do with it. She committed the crime that they've actually now charged Trump with, which is not gross negligence. She willfully did this. She willfully violated the Espionage Act. She knew intentionally when she set up this communication system that she was necessarily going to violate the classified information laws, and she did it anyway. She destroyed government files. She did it under subpoena, and they didn't prosecute her.
Well, and fast forward, that's a good comparison, contrast, and fast forward to present day, and under Section 793 of the Espionage Act, one of the provisions is gross negligence. So under that provision, wouldn't Biden be prosecutable for having classified docs in his garage and Corvette and everywhere else?
Yeah, I think that the Democrats always overplay their hand. and I think they've done it here to a fairly well. So, look, my view of it, I know this, pro-Trump people want to throw stuff at me when I say this, but this is just, I don't mean any malice by it. I just mean it's a matter of math to me more than anything else. Before this array of indictments and civil complaints happened, I didn't think Trump could win because I think it is high water mark. 54% of the country was voting against him, and I don't think he'll ever see his high water mark again. So this isn't, I don't mean this as an attack on Trump. I just didn't think he could win anyway. So I don't think the Democrats had to do this. But by doing it, they have assured now that from now until Election Day, because Trump is very effective at this kind of messaging, two things are going to be front and center for the public. One is exactly what you just mentioned. By the letter of the Espionage Act, he's guilty. Now, the way Smith indicted this case, the reason they're relying on the willfulness prong is they don't want to talk about the gross negligence prong because that would convict Biden if people pay too much attention to it. So they're trying to steer the case away from that. So already they're politicizing the process of prosecuting Trump. But Trump is going to make people read the Espionage Act, and that's going to put Biden in a very bad spot, which this is gratuitous on their part. They decided to do this. They didn't need to. And the second thing is, why isn't there a special counsel for the Biden family influence peddling scandal? There's no conflict of interest between the Biden Justice Department and Trump, which is why the Biden Justice Department was investigating Trump for a year and a half without a special counsel. Garland put one in there sheerly out of politics, not law. A special counsel wasn't required, but they want to pretend that Biden and the Biden Justice Department don't have anything to do with the decision of prosecuting Trump. No one believes that because Smith reports to Garland, and the power he exercises is Biden's.
Well,
So
didn't Garland
they
have
are
to
in the
sign off
country.
on this 7-count indictment?
He'll say he didn't. But Amy, and maybe they never even had a conversation about it. But what I try to tell people is the Democrats are much better at this than Republicans are. They picked Smith because he knew what was expected of him.
Yep.
If people
Yep.
keep asking, do you think Garland and Smith discussed this before he, hauled off indicted? No.
No
They
need to.
Smith, right. They picked him because he knows Garland doesn't want to have that conversation. Garland wants to be able to go out to the cameras and say, never discuss it with him. We don't have anything to do with this. But they picked this guy because he knew what was expected of him, and this is what was expected of him.
So since Trump had Secret Service protection at Mar-a-Lago and surveillance cameras on the area where these alleged classified documents are or were, how is this espionage?
Well, there's a doctrine. This is actually a subject that's close to my heart in a way because I prosecuted people years ago for seditious conspiracy terrorists. And I used to get the question, how is this sedition? And the thing was, sedition is in the title of the statute, but it's not in the charging language. So it's similar with espionage. The Espionage Act lays out a sliding scale of about 6 different offenses, at the very top of which the most serious ones are like real espionage cases. So you're talking about people who are moles, who worm their way into the government and steal secrets and then give them to a foreign power to try to hurt the United States. That's the worst offense in the Espionage Act. And then it works its way down the scale to officials who are trusted with national defense information who are grossly negligent in mishandling it and therefore lose it or, accidentally destroy it, et cetera. So it's an array of offenses. It's called the Espionage Act because that's just the title of it, but you don't have to prove espionage in order to make out every offense in the statute.
Just in terms of precedent that Trump's attorneys may argue in court, there's a district court case in D.C. that's about a decade old involving former President Bill Clinton that concluded a president has broad and mainly in the main, unchallengeable power to determine which documents from his presidency can be kept personally, and so that they would argue any documents moved to Trump's homes fall under that category. And the ABA, the American Bar Association, seem to agree that the guidelines support his contention that presidents have broad authority to formally declassify most documents that are not statutorily protected while they are in office. And of course, they have at least one witness, it would seem to me, because he's been a witness publicly, former DOD Chief of Staff Kash Patel, who's said that Trump declassified documents in his presence. And now whether there's, I know we get into the processes of what constitutes substantial declassification, but I mean, isn't there, do those precedents have any merit in your mind in terms of the argument that Trump's lawyers could make in court to short circuit this discussion of, willful mishandling of classified info?
Yeah, I don't think so. I read that district court case 2 days ago because I had to deal with it in connection with something else I was writing. And it really doesn't help Trump because the issue in the case was whether Clinton, when he was president, could designate something that he formed himself. These are recordings that he and a historian made. Whether he could take that and say it was an aide memoir that was his personal property, as opposed to there was no issue in the case about declassification because these tapes were not classified. So the question was whether, when he was president, he could designate something as personal property and keep it that way. Trump, that's not really the issue in this case, because with Trump, you're dealing with agency intelligence reports, and there's no evidence that while he was president, he tried to designate them as personal property, which would have been absurd to do because they obviously weren't his personal property. I think on Kash Patel, I don't think I've always thought the declassification thing is a red herring in this case, because what the Espionage Act talks about is national defense information. So even if Trump declassified the documents, which I don't really think there's evidence that he did, I'll be interested to hear what Kash's testimony is. But, at the same time, you would expect that if a president did something like that, it's supposed to be documented. So if it wasn't, that'll be interesting. But it's kind of neither here nor there, because even if he declassified these documents, they're still national defense information. So if he had them and he didn't handle them properly and he didn't return them when he was asked to have them returned, it's not going to help him that he declassified them. If he did, which I don't think he did, because I think if there was evidence that he did, his lawyers wouldn't have been afraid to, repeat that claim in court, which they've steadfastly declined to do.
What are we talking about, though, too, in terms of potential punishment? I know, the top lines are always up to 20 years in prison and so on and so forth. And yet we have real world cases in terms of how this actually plays out. Not that long ago, high profile case, former CIA Director General David Petraeus, who pled guilty to one count of unauthorized removal and retention of classified material. He was apparently handing classified material over to his paramour at the time. He pled guilty to one count, a misdemeanor. I think he paid a fine of $40,000 and he got 2 years probation. So, I mean, the other thing here, too, is, realistically, even if you secured a conviction that could be sustained, what are you talking about in terms of punishment, and how are the larger interests of justice served when the waters are as muddy as they are in terms of the equal application of the law?
Yeah. So I agree. I'm glad you brought up the Petraeus precedent, because I went crazy when that happened at the time. I can't believe that they charged him with a misdemeanor rather than a felony. And I thought that they treated a serious case in a very unserious way, and then he should have gotten slammed. So the fact that he didn't is, yet another indicator that we don't have even-handed justice in this country if you're a connected person. What I have my eye on, Dan, is, the Espionage Act is what you're going to hear, notwithstanding Biden's problem, is that, like, if you're a military person and you mishandle classified documents, you go to jail. I mean, they're not like, for the most part, they're not 20-year sentences, but 2-3 years. And the second thing is, courts tend to punish obstruction pretty seriously. And if they're able to prove that Trump caused a sworn statement that was knowingly false to be provided to the grand jury, I'm not saying that he's been convicted of that. He gets to have a trial over that. But I think to a court, grand jury, misleading the grand jury is going to be a bigger deal than what he did with the classified documents. Because at the end of the day, I think what they're going to say with the classified documents is maybe he technically violated the statute, but there's no evidence that any of it fell into the wrong hands or that the country was harmed by it. But judges take grand jury stuff pretty seriously.
So what's the time?
But before I want to get to the other side. Biden, if you're advising Jim Comer, Jim Jordan, Kevin McCarthy about this House oversight pursuit of Biden Incorporated in the wake of the document that the FBI finally has allowed House Republicans on that committee to see that alleges very specific bribery of Hunter and Joe by this Ukrainian oligarch who owned the oil and gas company on which Hunter Biden had a board seat. What do you tell them to do? How should they proceed?
I think they should proceed by telling the country that the issue here is the FBI, which it looks like there's a growing accumulation of evidence that the FBI conspired with Democrats in connection with the 2020 election to suppress information about Biden. But I think for their own sake, and in order to be able to sell the country on what is, I think actually that was the most important story of yesterday, even though it's not the one obviously that got everybody's attention. But they need to be very careful that they're not coming off as Trump's defense lawyers, because what the issue that they're dealing with, which is the putting of the law enforcement and intelligence apparatus of the government, the leveraging of it in favor of Democratic Party politics, is one that on its own merit needs to be pursued vigorously, and we need to get a complete record on it. And it may mean that the FBI's got to be rebuilt from the bottom up. But they're not going to make headway with the people they need to convince if they come off to the public as if they're doing this in order to be Trump's defense lawyers, rather than to fix a profound problem in our country, which is the FBI.
Well, but I mean, what about the target, though, too, the Biden Incorporated? I mean, these are serious charges that have some level, that have enough credibility to be investigated. I mean, you can't take a hands off when it comes to the allegations that have been made against the sitting president of the United States.
No, I'm not saying that at all. In fact, as I said before, I think one of the two main issues that by doing what they did yesterday, the Democrats have assured are going to be major issues is, number one, Biden's guilt, obviously, on the Espionage Act, but more importantly, why don't we have a special counsel on the Biden family investigation? Because Merrick Garland should have done that the minute he got into office. And, every day the evidence mounts. By the way, October of this year, 2023, tick, 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 the statute of limitations runs on Hunter Biden's gun charge. So my only point, yes, look, that should have taken 5 days to investigate, right?
Right.
So what we're learning, the FBI, what they do is they tell you an investigation is open, and then they take the information they get, they put it in the file, and they don't act on it. Then when Congress comes to ask them about it, they say, we can't discuss that because there's an ongoing investigation. But it's an ongoing investigation they're not doing anything about. So on the one hand, they're covering this guy to make sure he doesn't actually get prosecuted while the statutes of limitations run out. And on the other hand, when they get subpoena demands, they say, we can't give you that information because it could compromise an ongoing investigation. And is it great that Comer, fought with them and got this information? Yes. But on the other hand, it took them 5 weeks. They don't have 5 weeks for every single piece of information while the clock tick, tick, tick goes by and, they're not going to have any cases to bring against the Bidens
Right.
because they buried them.
Right, which is why he couldn't waste a lot of time with a contempt proceeding, too. Andy McCarthy, former Chief Assistant U.S. Attorney, Southern District of New York, contributing International Review, author of Ball of Collusion. Andy, thank you as always. Appreciate it.
Have a great day, guys.
Thank you. And coming up on Chicago's Morning Answer,
The most strict headmistress in Britain, 707.
it is now 7 a.m. WIND Chicago.
Former president ever to be indicted on federal charges.
It's election interference at the highest level. There's never been anything like what's happened. I'm an innocent man. I'm an innocent person.
He calls the charges related to classified documents found at his Florida resort a hoax.
Special counsel Jack Smith has not announced anything. Indictment news is coming from Trump himself, but potentially